After dealing with the miscellaneous circus of crime, Frieren and her allies would continue their journey to Orsford. In doing so, Frieren would make a stop. In her long life of living, she wanted to visit an old friend. She knew that this friend in particular was knocking on death's door, more or less, and that this would likely be the last time that she'd ever get to see him. He was an older dwarf, older than even Eisen himself. He was known as Old Man Val. He protected a small town. That was where that Frieren and Himmel and the others had met Old Man Val a long time ago, and even then he was senile. But all the same, Val had been protecting this small town for who knows how long. When asked why he did so, he explained that it was in honor of his wife. She were a human who lived long ago, and as a dwarf, his lifespan would long since outpace her own. But the village meant so much to her, so much so that he made a promise that until the day came when the two could be reunited in the afterlife, that he would stay and defend this village with every fiber of his being. It was his way of honoring her memory. Dwarves and elves could relate in that sort of front because of the fact that they outlived many of their loved ones. More often than not, sometimes they were easy to forget. The person you loved one day could just as soon grow old and die, but not just their death, the death of everything that meant anything to them. A village could soon pass, a new one could form, and the cycle could repeat itself over and over again. In fact, many people of the current village, the fact that it even lasted as long as it did was thanks to Old Man Val. He protected them, stood guard, cleared all of the monsters and demons and any creatures that came to do it harm. So many generations had grown up in this village, so many coming and going, and yet Old Man Val was the only thing that stayed consistent. Frieren understood better than anyone. It was a way that they were a lot like kindred souls, knowing that even if those whom they loved would soon pass away, their memory, their ideals, all of that lived on in them. And thus, they kept living in memory of those who were long since forgotten. After their visit with Old Man Val, as they continued into the final leg of their journey before reaching Orsford, Sign would make a stop at the crossroads. As the village that they would be passing by, it was a place where his old friend had once stopped to. His friend who went by his adventurer name, the Guerrilla Warrior, as a testament to his gorilla-like strength. While there, the only person who seemingly had any information on the whereabouts of Sign's friend was a stubborn old woman, but giving information was not something she did freely. No, the group would find themselves completing various errands for her, with the final one being of cleaning a statue of a pair of forgotten heroes. Frieren was able to recognize that one of the statues was of Croft, the monk whom they had met not too long ago, and the statue was of the warrior he fought with. Of course, for the villagers themselves, the names of such heroes had long since been forgotten, but not their place in the world. Of course, this seemed to be ever more of a present sentiment, especially for Frieren. It wasn't uncommon for her, when she were on her travels, to see statues of various heroes who had accomplished feats and fine works all throughout their lives. But of course, a statue can only serve as a memento for so long. Eventually, the names of those heroes became forgotten, Statues became overrun with plants and moss, dirt and grime, until they were hardly recognizable. Even the stubborn old woman had to admit she'd forgotten the name of these heroes, but they knew of their importance, and as such they honored them. After doing as requested, she would give the information that was needed, alerting to Sign that the person he was looking for had traveled in a far different direction from Orsberg, that the trail would take him further east. Of course, that meant that if Sign wanted to reconvene with his best friend, he'd have to leave Frieren's party. Although, before he'd ever get the chance to, yet another blizzard would pass by them, having them stuck in a cabin for a good bit of time. Although this wasn't entirely bad, it gave the group more time to spend together, more time to relax and take a break from their journeys. Francis and Stark, they would just take time training, gathering firewood, hunting, trying to keep their skills about them, enjoying each other's company in the short while that they had it. But eventually, the time would come for them to set on their ways, to go about their different paths and to conclude their journey together. But before leaving, Sign wanted to give his friends some much needed advice, especially the Francis. So, you got any words of wisdom for me, priest? Francis said. Words of wisdom from me probably wouldn't do a boy like you any good, Francis. Like I've said before, I won't discourage you from the path you choose to walk. And in fact, if your father truly was killed in a heinous way, then I pray that you will gain the vengeance that you're looking for. But I also pray for something else. That through your ordeal that you'll find peace. Find peace? One's own inner peace is more important than anything else. So many people get consumed with the thoughts of vengeance that they let it cloud their entire lives and their way of being. Your father meant the world to you, and he was taken away. I can't even begin to describe how that feels, since I myself grew up as an orphan shortly after my parents passed. Of course, it was under different circumstances, but all the same. I do pray for peace for you and for Frieren, because I know that for all the guilt and the burden that you carry, she carries it tenfold. After all, she raised your father and your uncle. I can't tell how much pain she must be in, and how unbearable it has to be at times. I can tell because of the way that she's overprotective of you children, more so than anything else. She's always looking out for you. So please, do the same for her. With that, Sign would make his leave. And as for Frieren and the others, they were now brought back to being a group of 4 once again. Perhaps their paths would cross in this world once again, but you never knew how life worked. If this was the last time that they would ever meet, then they were grateful for the memories that they had made along the way. In the meantime, the group would continue their way to Orsberg, as it was soon time for the first class mage exam to take place. Currently, Fern was only a 3rd class mage, since that was the only test that was available before they left. To become a 1st class mage, it took a lot of preparation. And during these exams, it wasn't uncommon for people to die. Because of that, the exams were held every 3 years. And seeing as how they didn't have time to wait for a whole 3 years, they were going to have to make this exam count. While Frieren and Fern would be taking the exams, Shark and Francis would be given special training by Frieren that they would have to work on while the two girls were busy. This was after their incident with the ringmaster. They needed to be more alert. They couldn't allow themselves to be taken off guard, especially through the use of illusion and trickery magic. Frieren would sit down both of the boys before leaving. When it comes to being warriors, both of you are incredibly skilled. I don't have to tell you that, you already know. However, when situations arise where your warrior skills won't be able to serve you, it'd be best to have some level of resistance. That's why I'm going to train you to practice and store up your mana. Store up our mana? Yes. While me and Fern are in the mage class, I want to teach you all magic resistance. That way, if a situation like this is to happen again, you'll have a way of defending yourselves. Frieren would place a binding spell on both of the boys. Now your mana is going to be suppressed, and it's going to store itself up. You'll have a little bit of it, that way you can complete physical tasks, but not as much. How much of our mana are you restricting exactly? I'd say around 95%. 95%? Stark would say. Come on now, don't you think you're reducing a lot? If we're only using 5% of our mana a day, I mean, how are we gonna... You all have your natural raw strength. Like I've said, Stark, you're far more powerful than you give yourself credit. I believe you both are more than capable of surviving on your own with just 5% of your mana. And it'll stay that way until me and Fern return. So do well not to die. With that, Frieren and Fern would leave the boys back in town, as they would have to make do until the girls returned from taking their exams. Meanwhile, Croft, the elf mage, walked down a dirt path. Off in the distance, he saw a young woman with green hair and dressed rather provocatively, to say the least. She carried a staff like that of a mage, but he was there for much different reasons. The bandits looked like they were getting ready to make a move on the girl, but before they'd even have a chance to, Croft would intervene, striking them down swiftly and knocking them all out. Gotta say, for someone that dressed like a monk, you seem to act rather unmonkly. I don't think that the good book would speak about harming others. What you call harm, I simply call mercy. There have been a slew of bandits that have been killed all along the paths, and I have reason to believe that you are the one responsible. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. If I was, would I be in trouble? Perhaps I should confess my sins. You willing to listen? I'm always willing to listen in a time of need, but I doubt you're the type of person to even ask for forgiveness, since I doubt you feel remorse for what you've done. Don't blame little old me. They came picking a fight. They wanted to start it. I finished it. Yes, but you and I both know that you're far more powerful than you're letting on. I can even tell from the bloodlust that radiates from your body. Your mana oozes with the darkness. Ooh. You know what they say about opposites. They attract. And you're not a bad looking fella, But I gotta say, that's probably because of the elf genes, isn't it? For all I know, you could be over 1,000 years old looking at little old me. I'm not even close. But all the same, if I can save lives, then I will try to do so. Hopefully, you'll just go on your path. I will. Judging from the direction, you're heading to Orsburg? Indeed. The first class mage exams are coming up, and I'm ready to get my certification. Is that right? Croft would say. Frieren and their allies were heading in that direction. Yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting for you. Oh yeah? And why is that? You'll meet some very interesting people. You think so? Call it a hunch. Take care of yourself, Ubel. And you? I'm Croft, the monk. I pray that if we do cross paths again in your lifetime, it'll be under more amicable circumstances. Indeed. No need to come to blows. Take care of yourself, Croft. As you, Ubel. And with that, the two would go about their separate ways, with Croft heading in the opposite direction. That girl was definitely trouble, but Frieren and the others should be able to take care of themselves. One thing was for sure, when you gather together that many powerful and capable mages, sparks are definitely set to fly, and you never know what the outcome's going to be. In the meantime, as the mages gathered together for the exams, a new figure was making their way into Orsburg. A rather ordinary individual. A man dressed in a red cloak and hood, keeping to himself as he crossed through the city gates. The man had traveled a great distance, crossing over many terrain and many dangerous locations, fighting monster, demon alike. He went by many names, many aliases, but he was a simple man, and he preferred to keep a simple identity. In the underworld, he was known only as the Hood. For many, he was nothing more but a rumor, a mere legend and myth, especially amongst the bounty hunter community. But for the few that knew of him and knew what he was capable of, he was someone that you steered clear. It was said that the man dressed in the red hood, he was no man. He may have looked like a man, he may have walked and talked like one, but what he was something entirely different. He was not a human nor monster. He was something that even the demons feared. Many that claimed to look into his eyes, they said that nothing looked back at you except darkness. This man was the embodiment of dark, its essence given form. There was no one that he couldn't catch. There was no one that could escape his shadow. And now, the shadow of the bounty hunter known only as the Hood had cast out his darkness onto his new target, the one of whom had brought the ire of many in the criminal underworld. someone who was said to be legendary. But for the Hood himself, he dealt with many legends, and they all fell just the same. And she would be no different. As he made his way through the city gates of Orspurt, he took a final look at the picture that he had been given before crumbling it away and disintegrating it to ash in the wind. Her image burned into his mind. Frieren the elf was his next target. And like all his targets, they would be subjugated to the dark abyss where no one could ever escape. And from there, they would fade to black. This concludes Frieren the Elf and the Archer, What If Frieren Trained Hawkeye, Season 1, Part 8. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow as we'll continue with What If Frieren Trained Hawkeye, Season 1, Part 9. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.